Do you want to change your life and how you interpret it? Well, then stop mistaking opinions for truth, because those interpretations that you're living from, in ontology, we call them assessments, and they're shaping your life more than you realize. So let me tell you something about the world most people live in. It's messy. Not messy like a kid's bedroom, messy like walking into a library and discovering that they've put all of the books in one big giant pile. Fiction mixed with non-fiction, biographies jammed in with science fiction, cookbooks next to conspiracy theories. And that library, that's what's going on inside most people's heads. Everything is just jumbled up. Opinions are treated as facts. Feelings get dressed up as truth. And then we live from these stories as if they're gospel. Now, this isn't theory. I've seen it change people's lives in my coaching sessions, and I've lived it myself. I continuously try to live into it. And once I learned how to ground my assessments and separate fact from fiction, those made-up stories, they lost their grip. And that gave me something very powerful: choice. And from there, it changed how I spoke, how I executed, and how I showed up. In this video, I'm going to help you sort the shelves of your own mind. You're going to learn how to separate what's actually true from what's your interpretation. We're going to talk about assessments, what they are, how they run your life, and how to ground them so that you're not reacting to ghosts. And yes, I'll show you how this connects to assertions, another word. Now, assertions are facts, and we're going to get into that, because if you can't tell the difference, you're in trouble. Because when I first studied ontology, I'll be honest, the term assessments was brand new to me. I'd sit there thinking, how the hell am I going to remember the difference between an assessment and an assertion? I had post-it notes stuck to my computer. I'd pause before speaking to double check my mental cheat sheet. I had all these little things that I had going on, and sometimes, very often, I'd get it wrong. And here's the funny thing. While I was learning about assessments, I was living in constant assessments about my ability to remember assessments. So you can see the irony, right? That's the thing. We're always in assessments. They're the water that we swim in. And until you learn how to use them, you can't see the effect that they're having on your life. So here's what we're going to do with this video. We're going to break down what assessments actually are. I'm going to show you how to tell them apart from assertions and why the difference matters. We will unpack why they're not bad, but can still mess you up if you don't ground them, if you don't become aware of them. I'm going to share some stories from Jungian standoffs to coaching wins, and they will make this click for you. And we're going to finish off with a simple 5-step process for grounding your assessments, separating your opinions from the truth. So doing this is going to help you stop living made-up limitations and start living in a grounded possibility. Because here's something to consider. Most of what's screwing you up isn't what's happening. It's how you're interpreting it. I'm sure you've heard this before. It's the meaning that we make. And those interpretations, they're assessments based on something from the past, made in the present, about the future. And if you don't get intentional about them, they will quietly design your life without your permission. So let's separate them from facts so you can stop reacting to illusions and start living and creating with clarity. Let's get right into it. Hi, I'm Filimon, and this is Functional Chaos, where I take ontological concepts and break them down into easy to understand terms so that they can be applied in business, organizations, personal relationships, everything right away. Almost every time I bring it up, people ask me, what even is ontology? Because it sounds fancy, doesn't it? In a nutshell, it's the seed of how you act, speak, do, and be. And I reckon most people have not yet cracked that nut to let that seed germinate. Now, it's not flashy or superficial enough for the masses. Most would rather avoid the discomfort it takes to grow into what's possible. But for those who do want to become, once they understand it, they realise it's something they've always needed. Now, I'm not doing this in a suit with a corporate polished tone and nice stories. I'm doing it in real life with grit, language, and my own leadership that actually works. So like in all previous videos, I'm going to give the whiteboard a workout whenever I feel something is necessary to jot down. Now let's get into video number 7 on this series of basic linguistic acts, the speaking habits of life. All of them tie into each other and they impact and they enable each other. And so far we've gone through the introduction, we've made requests, responses to requests, offers, promises and declarations. There's a bit of a compound effect as it happens. And now we land here. Assessments. Put in simpler terms, assessments are opinions and judgments. They are not only things that we say to ourselves about ourselves when we are with ourselves, they're things that we openly communicate about how things are not, and how they should be or could be. They are the statements and stories we tell to make sense of what we see and to justify how we feel. And they live rent-free in our heads. We say things like, this won't work. I'm not built for this. I can't rely on anyone. She's always let me down. No one understands me. They are stupid. Before we go any further, I want to add that they are not all negative. They can be positive as well. That restaurant has the best food. He's got potential. She's a great problem solver. Dogs are the best and most loyal pets to have. So these assessments are the running commentary in our heads that we often mistake for truth. There's nothing wrong with having opinions, but they're still just opinions. Different people will have different standards, different definitions, and different experiences. The concern comes when we treat them like they're an absolute truth, and then, as we see out there in the world, we go to war over them. People may have different standards of what potential is. Others may solve problems more efficiently. People have allergies towards dogs, or cat people may disagree. Often our blanket statements are where we get self-righteous without any actual proof. And we're going to get into that. From there we become inflexible, and it could lead to being resentful towards others who have a different opinion. In this video, I'm going to focus more on the negative ones, the negative assessments. Not because I'm negative, but because it's going to help life more positive. So whether you say them out loud or they live in your head, the result is going to be the same. You act, feel, and limit yourself from them. And you relate to other people from them, meaning people relate and measure you from them. Damn, let's repeat that again because it's quite layered and important. You act from them, you feel from them, you limit yourself from them, and you relate to other people from them, meaning other people relate and measure you from them. They form their own judgments and opinions, their own assessments of you based on the assessments and behaviours you say and do. Now here's the twist. Assessments aren't the enemy. They're how we make sense of the world. You may have heard the saying that we humans are meaning-making machines. I have it that we are actually assessment-making machines, creating, expanding and perpetuating meanings from those assessments, building entire realities from these judgments and opinions that we've never stopped to check. And here's where assertions come in. Assertions are the statements that can be verified. They can be proven true or false. Assertions are the non-fiction section of the library. Assessments, they are the fiction side. They may be useful, but they're still a story. Okay, let's go through a few examples. I'm keeping the writing small simply because I don't know how much space I'm going to take up. So, zoom in. So let's look at an assessment in this library of ours. She's outspoken, where an assertion could be, she really spoke up in that meeting. Another example of an assessment is, he's bad at business. But if you look at the assertion of it, it could be, well, the facts of it, his last 2 ventures didn't make a profit. Then we've got, they're unreliable, where an assertion could be, They arrived at our last meeting very late. So the left side, that's your story. The right side, this is what actually happened. And there's a big difference. And here's why it matters. You can challenge an assertion with facts. And you can challenge an assessment by checking what it's grounded in. And we're going to go through some grounding examples pretty soon. Most arguments, breakdowns, and leadership mistakes, they happen when people, they confuse the two. Remember all the books jumbled in together? And we're going to go deeper on assertions in the next video. But for now, just contemplate this. If you can't tell the difference between the two, assessments and assertions, you will confuse your interpretations of reality. And that's where most breakdowns start. So assessments, what they do is they reveal a value or a concern that we have. An assessment is not a fact, it's a judgment, an opinion, a perspective, a belief, an expectation. It's even an assumption, or how I like to say in many of my relaxed environments, it's a bullshit story that you have made up. So when you hear me use the term in this video, refer to this list. It's something that is often based on a concern, as I said, something that we care about. Now, if I say, he's disorganized, now that's not just random. That tells you that I value structure, time, order. If I say, she hesitates too much to be a leader, now that could tell you that I care about initiative. So every assessment reveals something that I care about. And remember, it's made up. Alan Seiler from the Ontological Coaching Institute says it in a much better way than I do. He says that assessments are not truths. They are indicators of what we care about and how we see the world. Like I said, he articulates things so much more eloquently than I. So like I said, for me, that they are bullshit stories that we say and use to deflect, deny, validate, or justify. Assessments reveal your values, your priorities, and your worldview. But unless they're grounded, they can trap you. That's why they're so powerful and also so dangerous. Because if you don't stop and question them, you are going to live like they are the truth. Live thinking that you are right and others who don't agree with you are wrong. And how much of that do we see happening out there in our society, in our businesses, relationships, and even at home? In the last video, I shared my experience that I had many years ago with the unions when I was in the construction industry, and how making a declaration set me on a whole new aligned path. I shared how we were doing things different from any other company back then. One of those things that we did was how we promoted ourselves on social media. Every day I would go to site with a camera. I'd take photos and videos and I would post what was happening on site, the progress that we were making, pictures of the team, contracts we had just been awarded, projects that we were tendering on. And I especially like sharing things about our team culture, like when somebody in the team had their birthday. What I would do was I would take a cake to the site, and up on the deck, the whole team would sing happy birthday to the person in front of all of the other trades, sometimes hundreds of people. We would cut the cake and eat it right there. Now, considering how big the team was and how many different projects we had, it seemed like these happy birthday events were happening all of the time. And other trades, they became used to it, that so much so that they would join in the singing, even jokingly telling me that their birthday was coming up. Our team loved this, and often I would be told that it was the only happy birthday song and cake that they got to cut for their birthday. Now, this was the kind of culture that I had built, and I was proud to put that kind of stuff out there. It was also the reason why I said in that last video why I was getting phone calls from other workers asking to jump onto our team. All of these things not only gave us positive attention, it also brought out the hyenas. And as I'm also mentioned in that video, hyenas only think about what they can eat and take today. So what I want to do is focus on this video is what happened after I left the industry and started doing what I'm doing now, building people instead of building buildings. I was so attached to the assessments that came from the event with the union that I went totally the other way and removed myself from any thoughts of marketing and promotion, knowing full well that what I'm doing now absolutely requires it. That's not an assessment. I assert that. And it's a hell of a lot more than when I was in the construction industry. This also created a whole bunch of other ungrounded assessments from the ordeal, such as I can't put myself out there. And if I put myself out there, they're going to come for me. Even though I've grounded them and know that they are not true, I would be lying if I said they never still tug at me. And me doing this right now, making these videos, is my way of overcoming them. I made these assessments real for too long, based on the past, in the present, for my future. And it's been fun, somewhat dismantling them along the way. So how do you check your assessments? How do you ground them? How do you separate what's bullshit from not being bullshit? Here's a simple way to ground them. 5 steps that were devised by Julia Zimmerman, and steps that I've learned to apply as often as I can whenever I think, share, or hear an opinion or a judgment or any of these things over here. Or sometimes if I'm too attached to something and it can stifle options and possibilities, connections, I go to this. I've made these steps less complex to the original ones and simplified the language to make them a little bit easier to grasp. However, the essence of them is still there. So this is them. Number 1 is for the sake of what? Number 2 is what area of life does this assessment relate to? Number 3 is what standards are you measuring this assessment against? Number 4, what facts can you offer to support the assessment? Number 5, what facts can be used as evidence against the assessment? So let's break them down, and at the end I'm going to use a personal situation as an example, and maybe another one if I've got time. Step 1, for the sake of what? Basically what we're asking here is, why are you holding on to this assessment? What's the payoff? What's it protecting you from? Does holding on to this belief help you avoid something? If so, what is it? Is it saving you from discomfort, the discomfort of growth? From effort, from responsibility? What are you trying to achieve by keeping it? What is it taking care of? Why is it so important that you hold on to it? It's serving you in some way, and you have to investigate this. This first step can be both powerful and confronting, because right away you're calling out your own bullshit. It's where you go, oh, maybe I'm keeping this around because it's doing something for me. So let's use one of the most common examples, negative assessment examples out there. I'm not good enough. Now this comes up so often that I'm going to assert that most of you will relate. So why do people hold on to it? How does it both serve them and sabotage them? The responses I get from people who are willing to explore it are, it means I don't have to try and fail. Keeping it means I can hold myself back. I'm scared of the changes that I'm going to have to make. So holding on to it means I can play it safe. It means I don't have to confront the situation, or I'm so used to it that it's just who I am. Now here's the thing. Most of the answers people give in step 1, like I just did in those examples, they're more assessments. So you can layer this step and just keep peeling it back until you get to the truth. Step number 2, what area of life does this assessment relate to? In other words, where exactly does this assessment, this opinion live? Is it just about business, parenting, relationships, sport, finances? Or have you dragged it into everything, every area? Now this step is about compartmentalizing the assessment, because one mistake you or somebody else makes doesn't mean that you or they are a failure everywhere. So you stuffed up a job interview. Now that doesn't mean that you can't hold a personal relationship. They burnt dinner. Now that doesn't mean that they're hopeless with money. Get specific, pin the assessment to its relevant area of life and don't let it cross-contaminate. Now I have a resource called the 13 Arenas of Life that lets you assess all of the areas that we live in. You cannot not live in these areas. I'm going to put a link into the description so you can have it for free. It's perfect to identify where your assessments live. Brilliant. So then you can ground the assessments across all of these areas so you can identify, separate, and then ground them so you don't cross-contaminate and pollute all of them at the same time. Step number 3, what standards are you measuring this assessment against? What is the benchmark that you're using to judge yourself? The situation or the other person? Who or what are you comparing yourself to? Is it a mentor, a YouTuber, an ideal version of yourself that you've created, or a warped standard from a parent, a boss, or someone on social media? This is where a lot of people, me included, set themselves up to lose because they measure their apprentice stage against somebody else's mastery. For example, you may be starting out a new job or a hobby, like creating videos. And when you look back at your work, you cringe and judge yourself by saying, I'm never going to be good at this. I speak like a robot, or I move my hands around too much and I speak too quick. This is because you're comparing yourself to John, Jenny and Jack, who may have been doing it for years. And they do it in their own way, their refined way. You might be starting out and comparing your early steps to somebody else's who is 10 years deep. And that's the trap. We measure or compare the learning stages with mastery. So this query, what or who am I measuring against? That's a big one for me. I'm someone who has always learned from those who are levels above me. Unknowingly, I was also comparing my progress to where they were currently at, not where I am at and where they were at that time. So talk about a losing game. Now I like to look up and forward, not down and behind me. So as much as it's become a driver in my life, giving me lots of successes and great outcomes, it's also been one of my disablers when it comes to this step 3. So learning it was fantastic for me. It's where you call out the unrealistic standard that you're using to beat yourself or the other person or the situation up with. So are you comparing your first month in the gym to somebody else's 5th year? This one's huge. It kills momentum and connection fast. And it's also one of the easiest to reset once you spot it. Let's go to number 4. What facts can you offer to support the assessment? Not more opinions, not more feelings, facts. Separate the event from the meaning that you've given it. What actually happened? This is not about what you felt at the time. It's about what you saw. What a camera would have recorded if it was recording the event. So what I did here was event and meaning. You can see, like, that's an arrow, that's an arrow, and an event happens, we make a meaning from it. Many of you would have seen this before, which leads to another event happening, which leads to another meaning, which leads to another event, which leads to another meaning. And before you know it, your library, books of fiction and non-fiction have all collapsed into each other and jumbled each other up because you've mixed up judgments and opinions with substantiated and grounded evidence, haven't separated the two, haven't grounded them, made all this meaning, and then gone into another event that most likely came from that meaning. So it's crazy how we do this kind of stuff. With step 4 and 5, something you have to be aware of, because it's so easy to use more assessments to support the main assessment. This is a big no-no. You want facts of the matter, evidence. This step is where you become your own investigator, not a drama queen, not a storyteller, just a calm, curious observer, gathering all the evidence, looking at it objectively, and just seeing what you have. There are so many common examples that I can offer that I've heard over the years. Now, you may have been compared to a sibling when growing up. Picked last in a sports team, I can't list them all. Failed at an exam, being corrected in front of people and feeling embarrassed. Had an idea ignored at work. Did not get the promotion or the recognition at work. Had a manager that micromanaged things. Maybe you were cheated on in a relationship, or comparing yourself to people on social media, told no for something that you requested that was important of you, or something that's very common, made a mistake or stuffed something up that you're actually pretty good at. These are all events. So looking at these examples, what you want to do is separate this event from what happened, the meaning, the assessments that you made up. Because these moments, what they do is they often lead people to form opinions, judgments of themselves, of others, such as, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I don't matter, I'm too broken, I'm never going to measure up, I need fixing. So don't use these events to form and justify your identity. Facts are facts, stories are stories. To better understand this, listen back to those many examples that I rattled off. And you're going to see that you will have an assessment for each one yourself. You might compare it to somebody else's situation, not your own. And most likely, each person's interpretation is going to be different. Learn to remove yourself from the event and look at it objectively. Doing this is going to allow you to see the facts at hand. And you're going to see that there is little to no real facts other than the event. Something happened, and what it means is what you made it mean, or what you want it to mean to justify step one. For the sake of what? Remember to be your own lawyer, whatever it is, and present the facts that support the assessment. That was a long-winded explanation of number 4. Geez. So number 5, what facts can be used as evidence against the assessment? I should put a resource up in there for you guys for this. What did I say? What facts can be used as evidence against this assessment? Step 5, put in a different way. I'm into my little columns today, aren't I? So put in different ways. What real evidence is there that challenges or contradicts this story? Are there any truths that you've overlooked and don't match this judgment, this opinion? What solid ground exists that proves this story doesn't fully hold up? Would somebody else agree with this opinion about the event, or is it just you? What might you be ignoring? Or what else is true that you have not yet considered? Just like in step 4, it is important to not use more assessments about the assessment, because assessments do not ground assessments. More opinions about the opinion do not separate what is from what you think. So in this step, you may well find that you are capable and worthy. You might find that other people you have judged are not what you said they are. And what you did was build opinions and other opinions upon opinions, and then treated them as facts and made them real, and now realise that things aren't so bad after all. It's so good just to put things in the column. That story about I'm not worthy. What about the time that your kid hugged you and said, you're the best? What about the friend who always calls you when they need support and comes to you? Or the time you stepped in and helped someone when no one else did? The project that you led last year that delivered great results. So it's so easy to discount these moments, to say, yeah, but that's different. Well, it's not. This step forces you to stop cherry picking the failures. Note them down. This is connected to number 5. So you can start seeing the fuller truth. You may discover that you do follow through, just not in areas where you're feeling burnt out. That you are worthy, you just haven't been around people who recognise it. That you can succeed, you're just not learning in real time. This is where you stop reaching to shadows and start responding to what's actually there. What facts have you been ignoring? What might you discover if you weren't so committed to the negative story? That's the power of this step. Step number 5. It opens the door to building a new, more grounded assessment based on truth, not trauma. Now let's run a full grounding process on a real assessment, start to finish, using my own union story, which I shared a lot of in the last video. The assessment that I created back then was, if I put myself out there, they will come for me. So step 1, for the sake of what? Why was I holding on to this? When I dug into this assessment, I realized that holding on to it protected me from the risk of being targeted again. It gave me an excuse to avoid promoting myself, which meant I didn't have to face the discomfort of visibility and this big change that I was making at this stage in my life. It was a shield from potential conflict, but also a cage that stopped me from growth. Step 2, what area of life did this relate to? Well, this assessment lived squarely in self-promotion and business, particularly the construction business. But I let it bleed into all areas of life, like networking, public speaking, going to events, and even sharing personal achievements and milestones online. Silly, yeah? Identifying its home base then stopped it from cross-contaminating everything else. Step 3, what standards was I measuring it against? So I was comparing myself to the perfectly safe business owners who done their best to avoid criticism. Unrealistic, because anyone who's visible does get some form of pushback. Now, I like to think that I'm quite a bold, passionate and expressive person who likes to share. And I was comparing myself to those who were more the opposite. And this was making me numb. So step 4, what facts can I offer? What facts support this assessment? Because when I stripped away the emotion, and there was a lot, there was just one fact. One incident with the union. That's it. A single event in an otherwise long history of promoting my work and sharing parts of my life and successes without an issue. Step 5, what facts contradict the assessment? So every other time I've promoted myself, nothing happened. In fact, it brought opportunities, clients, growth. The evidence overwhelmingly showed my fear was built on one isolated event, not a pattern. And that's the process. Once I grounded the assessment, I could see it for what it was: untested, outdated, and very limiting. From there, I had the choice to replace it with something much more powerful. And I'm going to share what that was pretty soon, because it's relevant in an example. Making these videos you're watching now is living proof that I'm no longer owned by that old story. Even sharing the story is proof. Before I wrap this section up, I want to share some other questions that are worth considering and reflecting on after you've grounded an assessment. For instance, what are some of the potential consequences of continuing to hold this assessment? What new perspectives and possibilities have opened up for you now that you've explored and grounded this assessment? What do you see yourself doing differently? And following up from the last video on declarations, what declaration would you like to make? So we are responsible for what comes out of our mouth and for how it lands with others and people around us. So how responsible are we really when it comes to our assessments? These things. Do we take care to check them, or do we just throw them around like facts? Something to consider. Ungrounded assessments, they're everywhere. And there is a cost. Ungrounded assessments, they're vague. They're just a bad communicator. They're absolute. I'll never change. And they're emotion-based. This is just who I am. And you don't even realise that they're optional. But grounded assessments, now these, they're specific. They're tied to actual events. They invite conversation instead of shutting it down. Like, instead of he's unreliable, you can say things like, he's missed the last 3 meetings with not much notice. So you see the difference? One keeps you stuck and the other creates clarity. Saying he's unreliable means he's unreliable across all areas of life. So what would be good for you to do is to draw 2 columns, ungrounded on one side and grounded on the other, and use real examples from your own life or your business or whatever. So I invite you and just fill in the grounded assessments and the ungrounded assessments. A great memory that comes to mind is when someone that I worked with a while ago. So when we first met, she was in a dingy apartment she wasn't happy with in the city, working as an office manager, and she knew deep down that she was a quirky and creative person. But knowing and living are 2 very different things, which I'm sure many of you can relate to. So at ground zero, her life was filtered through assessments like, some friendships will drift away because of my growth. My inner voice makes me feel awkward about myself. What else did she say? Excitement never lasts. I lose interest quickly. I feel guilt and shame because I don't know what I'm doing. Not knowing makes me feel stupid. Self-criticism is holding me back from my progress. These are the things that came up in the early conversations. Every dream she had came with a yeah but attached to it. Every step forward came with a voice that said she wasn't ready, wasn't enough, and shouldn't risk it. Together we started naming those assessments out loud. We started to go through the grounding process, not hiding them, not sugarcoating them, and using the 5 steps, just like I did in my story earlier. I want to reinforce another example for you. So step 1, for the sake of what, we explored why she was holding on to those stories. For not knowing makes me feel stupid, she realized it protected her from being exposed, from feeling like a fraud, and from having to take risks that could end in failure. So it was safety, not truth. Step 2, what area of life did this assessment relate to? She saw that when she said, I lose interest quickly, it lived mostly in her career pursuits, not in her creative side and her quirky pursuits. So we doubled down on them. That stopped it from spilling into all these other areas where it didn't belong. So step 3, what standards was she measuring it against? So her assessment of I'm not ready came from comparing herself to early work, comparing her early work to seasoned professionals with 10 plus years in the field. She called it for what it was, measuring apprentice work against mastery. Step 4, what facts supported her assessment? For excitement never lasts, she could only point to a couple of misaligned pursuits that were thrust upon her by others. Really, no consistent pattern existed. Step 5, what facts contradict this assessment? So she remembered times when she stuck with something for years when it mattered, like playing music, drawing and learning complex creative skills. So these examples showed how she can sustain excitement when it was tied to her purpose. So the shift happened really right away. She just went on with life. Once she grounded each of the assessments, they just lost their grip. We flipped the lens from excitement never lasts to I can create excitement by doing things that light me up. With the assessment, friendships drifting apart is a loss. She realized that aligned relationships can't show up until she made the space. From awkward to uniquely me. So we didn't really wait for courage to magically appear. She built it step by step by taking action while still feeling the fear, by still accepting the uncertainty. And the result over time, her environment, work and identity completely transformed. She went from a dingy apartment to living on a yacht. From the yacht to a farm in a new city. From the farm to studying photography. From studying photography to becoming a working photographer. And I just spoke to her the other day and she's got commissioned for this great 4-meter piece that meant that she had to go up in a helicopter 4 times to take all the photos. What a journey. Dingy office to up in a helicopter. That's, yeah, it was just nuts. With so many awesome adventures along the way. So many crazy ones that one day I really hope that she writes a book. It wasn't luck, it was dismantling the assessments, grounding them, that kept her locked in the office manager who dreams identity and replacing them with grounded possibility, opening assessments for her. So she authored a life that matched the creative she always knew that she was, from her own authority. Remember that one in Declarations? She became the author, the authority in her own life. You might be asking, why do we cling to assessments? Well, sometimes we hold on to these bullshit assessments because they feel safe. They explain things. It's the context we understand. They protect us from trying and failing. Because if I believe I'm not confident, I don't have to ask for what I want. If I believe that I'm not a leader, I don't have to step up and take some risks. It's not truth, it's safety. But safety isn't the same as growth. I'd like you to think about this for a moment. If you assess yourself as not smart, you're not going to speak up. You're not going to lead. You're not going to try. Even if no one else is stopping you, you are. Or if you assess yourself as someone who is, somebody else is not trustworthy, you're going to pull away. You're going to avoid delegating. You're going to create distance, maybe micromanage. And you might never give other people the chance to prove otherwise. So important. Our assessments shape how we listen, how we speak, how we commit, and how we relate. They're the silent builder or breaker of every relationship that you're in, including with yourself. Assessments shape how we listen, speak, commit, and relate. So another good thing is just to look at it as a visual, is the assessment, then we ground the assessment, then we create a declaration. Rewriting an assessment isn't about swapping one opinion for another. It's about shifting the observer that you are so that your new interpretation opens up possibilities rather than closing them down. Sometimes that means moving from a negative to a positive. Other times it's simply reframing something so it no longer stops you. For example, there's lots of examples in this video, from I'm terrible at public speaking to I'm devoting my skill I'm developing my skill as a communicator. From I'm not a leader to I'm learning to lead in my own style. There aren't empty affirmations. That's what these aren't. They're declarations, and declarations are simply assessments of the future. When you rewrite an assessment, you're not pretending reality is different. You're intentionally shaping your lens to use so that you use it to interpret a reality. And that changes the actions that you're going to take. So you might remember earlier in the union story, I shared the assessment. If I put myself out there, they're going to come after me. They're going to come for me. So when I grounded it, the fear lost its grip. But the real change came when I went beyond just dismantling it and replaced it with a declaration. A declaration that matched the scale that I wanted to play at. And this declaration, it was quite long at the time. It was, in playing a big game, it means I'm going to run into some bad guys. And when that happens, it's a sign that I'm going in the right direction. The benefits outweigh the risks, and putting myself out there will bring criticism, disagreement, and even people I will unintentionally and sometimes even intentionally piss off. So instead of resisting it, I wear it as proof I'm exactly where I should be. And here's the thing. When you back that new assessment, that declaration with behavior, it stops being a nice idea and starts becoming part of who you are. Okay, so I'm running out of room. This is going to be the last thing I scribble up here. So these are the basic linguistic acts, and this is what the whole series is being made on. And I have thrown some extras in, like trust and responses to requests and things that I see relevant. And as you can see, the main core of these acts are assertions, which is going to be the next video, declarations, which are assessments. They become assertions, I dare say, after they've become live, when they've happened. We have requests and offers, which both constitute to a promise. If you haven't watched all those videos, and the next one that's coming, my suggestion is you go back and watch them all, because they're also relevant. They're assessments littered throughout. And I'm going to give you some examples, because assessments, what they are is they're the backstage crew for almost every one of these acts, these speaking habits of life. They dictate the requests you do or you don't make by saying things. They're going to say no anyway. They influence the offers that you hold back on. They've got it covered. The promises you avoid, they know what I mean. Or the declarations that you never make. Who am I to say that? If your assessments are muddy, every other one of the basic linguistic acts that you use will be impacted by that muddiness. Clean assessments are the foundation for clean commitments, clear requests, and declarations people can actually trust. That's why in the next video on assertions, we're going to zoom in on the non-fiction side of the library, so that you can stop treating your beliefs as facts and start operating with real clarity. Okay, let's wrap this up. The thing is, this topic alone could be done in many hours. I could make lots of videos on this, because it ties into so many other concepts. And you're going to see what I mean as this series goes on and on. We have barely started, so consider this the trailer. If you have any questions, queries, or comments, let me know. I'm Filimon, and this is Functional Chaos, where I make ontology simple enough to use in your business, in your relationships, and just in your everyday life. You don't need to master every concept. You just need to catch and apply the ones that are quietly running your life. Because once you see the assessment for what it is, the judgment, the opinion, the perspective, the belief, etc., you can ground it, or you can rewrite it. And the next time somebody says something like, "That's just how I am," smile, because you know it's just a story, and stories can change. This is video 7 in our series on basic linguistic acts. I think there's 3 more to go, and I've also added some other relevant concepts that I think attach to them. If you've been following along, you're already building a toolkit that can completely shift the way you speak, the way you lead, and the way you connect. If you're new here, this video is not a standalone. So I invite you to go back and watch these earlier videos. They're all part of a series, and they're going to give you a foundation to make this one stick. I'm going to put the link to the playlist in the description. Also, if you got value, do all the stuff that silently helps me feel good about myself. Cancels out all those negative assessments. Flick the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, which is going to be assertions. And I'm going to make sure this one's shorter. This is the opposite of assessments. But maybe it's not going to be as mysterious and as intoxicating. So that's us. Remember, don't just listen. Go ground a few of your own assessments today and see what happens when you start living from what's real and not what's assumed. As always, take what you will.